Mm-hmm.
Okay.
First you have to tell me about yourself.
Okay. Many Jews feel very uncomfortable with this idea that we are the chosen people. What the Torah calls Am HaNivchar, or Am Segula, or the different terms that are used. Am Segula meaning a treasured people, and Am HaNivchar meaning the chosen people. Many great scholars will tell you that this term Am HaNivchar, the chosen people, is what's at the root of anti-Semitism. The Goyim know that we are the chosen people. It drives them crazy because we are the guilty conscience of the world. Just last year we saw an incursion into Gaza, right? And the IDF is dropping leaflets to warn people where they're going to bomb. They're sending out massive texts and telephone. Never in the history of warfare has any army ever done such a thing. It's never happened. No one conducts warfare the way we do. Despite the fact that CNN will show you the pictures of the few people that get harmed by things that are unavoidable, which aren't intended, it doesn't change the fact the lengths that the Israeli army goes to avoid casualties. I'll tell you one other thing on that topic. You may remember back to the Second Gulf War, when Saddam Hussein was ousted. Right before that, there was an incursion into Lebanon. Not the Lebanon War, that was back in '82, but there was an incursion into Lebanon. Al Jazeera at that time was not just broadcasting news, they had print newspaper also. It was a major article in Al Jazeera about Jews are such racists. They treat Arabs like such second-class citizens that when they came through the villages in Lebanon, they wouldn't even rape our women. That's how racist the Jews are. And they said, never in the history of the world does an army go through a village and not abuse the women. There's always some, whether it's the Americans in Vietnam or whatever it is, it's something that soldiers do. It's not something that the IDF does. Whether they're secular IDF or whether they're Dati IDF, that's not important. IDF soldiers don't do that. Now, to the Arabs, they want to show that that's a sign of racism because we're not machshiv, they're women. But we all know what that's really about. We're a different kind of people. We are a different kind of people. Many Jews of left political persuasion, and I'm not saying left or right is right or wrong. I'm not saying, just saying there's different types. Some of us are more left-leaning, some of us are more right-leaning. Many Jews on the left are very uncomfortable with this idea that we're a chosen people. It sounds discriminatory. It sounds elitist. It sounds racist. So we're going to talk a little bit about that. First of all, where does this concept come from? Does it come from the fact that we were given the Torah? Maybe. I think it comes from the fact that the Torah says it, first of all. So let's look at the psukim that say it. We're in Parshas Ve'eschanan, Ki am kadosh ata, because you're a holy nation. LaHashem Elokecha, to Hashem your God. B'cha b'char Hashem Elokecha, Hashem chose you, lios lo am segula, to be his treasured people. Mikol ha'amin, from all the other nations. So,
but why the left have a problem with that? Because actually by the Jewish way, if somebody want to convert, everybody welcome, if they really want. So it's not like, it's just us.
Because there are many people on the left side of the Jewish spectrum who are also left in the political spectrum. The left wing of the political world right now believes in tolerating everything. That's why we have, whether it's a gay issue or whether it's whatever it is, there's no such thing as something's wrong. Even serial killers now, they claim it's a genetic mutation which may make them predisposed to be a killer. There's articles that say that too. I don't know enough to know whether they're right or not. I have no idea. What I do know is that we don't say because someone is a kleptomaniac and that's a mental health disorder, we don't say it's okay for him to steal. We get him treatment. Okay? But for the left political persuasion, many people feel that to say this race or this nationality or this orientation, whatever the issue is, to say that they're not normal is racist. That's the society we live in right now. That is it. And that's one of the reasons why the same people that championed the state of Israel in the 1940s now champion the Palestinian cause. Whoever the underdog is, that's who they champion. In any event, this is what the Torah says about the Jewish people. The They're a chosen people, and they're a treasured people. But you know what? I got to tell you, I speak all around the country, and sometimes I go meet a group of people, and they say, well, that's if you believe the Torah. How do you know what the Torah says is true? How do I know it was given by God? Okay. So, I will tell you a statistic. Did you know, I'll share the article with you in a minute, did you know that 20% of all Nobel Prize winners since 1915 are Jewish? 1 out of 5. That's despite the fact that Jews represent 1/4% of the world population. Do you know what the odds of 1/4% of the world's population accounting for 20% of the Nobel Prizes are? And it's not just in medicine, it's in literature, it's in science, it's in art. I mean, it's every category you can imagine. Now, you could say that the reason Jews represent 20% of the world's Nobel Prize winners is because we've been creatures of privilege, right? We haven't had any pogroms, we haven't had a Holocaust, we've had everything everywhere we've ever gone. But that's not the case either. Jews weren't even permitted to be educated for much of the early 20th century. Even before the Holocaust, even before World War I, many countries in Europe had bans on Jews being educated. 20%? It's not just what it says in the Torah. These are facts. 1 out of 5 Nobel Prize winners are going to Jews. Could it be because the Nobel Prize Committee loves Jews? History would suggest otherwise, with the amount of terrorists and people like that that have been decorated as well. There is no rational way with statistics and science and explanations to explain how 1/4% of the world's population who have suffered at the hands of virtually every nation they've been in and been denied education can account for 20% of the world's population. There's only one way. We're different. We're different. Now, what does that mean? We're different. Can we accept that now? Are we all on the same page here at least? I see the doctor shaking his hand. Do you have some questions about that?
You don't want me to argue with you?
No, I do. Please.
No, you don't.
This is a small group. We're all friends here.
No, you don't.
Okay. I'll save it for later? Okay. Well, it's kind of hard to go on if you're not going to accept this baseline point. Okay. But I'm giving you a secular reason, and I'm giving you a Torah reason to accept the idea that Jews are different. Now, does that mean that we should go, I'm a Jew. I'm better than you. That would be the easy thing to do, right? It says right here in the book, every Christian in the world believes in this book. It says right here, I'm chosen, you're not.
You got a requirement around after that.
I'm sorry?
You have a requirement to do, you know.
That's very true. That's actually the next pasuk. It says it before and after that. It goes on to say that because of that, you keep my commandments and keep my covenant because I'm going to keep it with you because of the deal I made with your ancestors myself. I keep my word, you have to keep your word. So you're right. But look at it like this. You could be arrogant and say, I'm better. What does that mean, you're better? You may have talents that the rest of the world doesn't have. I would posit to you that you do. Jews are given certain abilities that most other people don't have. That's not to say that there isn't a guy or a Gentile who's an exceptional genius in the field of mathematics or the field of science or the field of art. There obviously are. But if you take 1,000 Jews and 1,000 non-Jews, chances are that those 1,000 Jews have superior qualities. It's not my decision. It's not my observation. It's what the Torah says. It's what the statistics say. I know it's very hard. It's very hard. For a lot of people I meet, this is a very hard thing. But again, you have to understand, it doesn't naturally flow from there that therefore we walk around with our head held high. Because all it means is that when we do things, we do them on a grand scale. We have an ability to magnify, we have ability to amplify on a very, very large scale. Take an example. A non-Jew wants to be a thief. He goes to the liquor store. and robs a liquor store, right? No. We have Bernie Madoff. When we steal, we do it big time. We don't steal a couple $100. We steal a couple $100 million. When a guy wants to steal, he goes and sells things to a pawn shop. We sell kidneys. We sell organs on the black market when a Jew decides he wants to do selling stolen goods. We don't do things always necessarily good or necessarily right. When we do things, we reach great heights, and when we mess up big time. Being an Am Segula and an Am Hanivchar doesn't mean that you're always right, and it doesn't mean that you're better. It means you have a greater responsibility, because whatever you do is going to be magnified, and it's going to be amplified. Moshe Rabbeinu. What does it say about Moshe Rabbeinu? What was his most amazing characteristic that he's renowned for? Anav mikol adam. Exactly. It's a Talmud Chacham here, see? Moshe Rabbeinu, Anav mikol adam. Moshe was the humblest of people? Now, that would suggest to me that Moshe is not the smartest guy around. And Moshe had to know that he's the only person talking to God. Moshe had to know that it was his staff that's splitting the Yam Suf. Moshe had to know that he's the only one getting instructions of what to say and how to lead the people. He's supposed to think that he's nothing? How is that possible? Anav mikol adam, being humble, does not mean that you walk around the opposite of arrogance and saying, I'm nothing. Moshe Rabbeinu knew who he was. He knew who's the only one talking to God. And he knew he's the only one that had the ability to perform these nisim at God's request. But he didn't say that made him better than anybody else. He understood that what it meant is that he had an awesome responsibility. Every minute, every second of every day, he had to take issue of who he was and make sure he was acting in accordance with God's will. Most of us can't do that for an hour, enough to daven. Moshe had to do it every second because of the level he was at. That's what it means, Anav mikol adam. He knew who he was, and because he had these special talents, because he had these special gifts, he knew it meant he had an awesome responsibility. That's where you start off of when you realize you're an Am Nivchar and an Am Segula. You don't start off with arrogance. On the contrary, you start off with, oh my gosh, what a responsibility. What do I have to do? So, on that, I want to share with you a couple of other ideas. There are two historical codes of Jewish law that are uniformly accepted by every religious Jew in the world. They are Maimonides, the Rambam code of laws, which is codified from the Babylonian Talmud, from the Talmud Bavli, in what's called the Yad Chazaka. That's Maimonides' code of law. Parallel to that is we have the Shulchan Aruch, written by Rabbi Yosef Karo, who largely the Ashkenazim follow Rabbi Yosef Karo, largely the Sephardim follow the Rambam, Maimonides, but there are exceptions. And on 94.6% of all halachos, the Rambam and the Shulchan Aruch agree. There's very small differences between them on various minhagim and things of that nature. 94.6% of the time, the Rambam and Shulchan Aruch are in complete harmony on halacha. But they are uniformly recognized by every observant Jew as the two authoritative texts of Jewish law. So, I pulled out one page of the Shulchan Aruch, which the Rambam largely mirrors it, but he spells it out a little bit better here. This is an interesting part that talks about what you should look for in a spouse. You would think we have treatises written in halacha about what kind of lulav and what kind of esrog and how much matzah you have to eat. How much pages do you think the Shulchan Aruch devoted to what you should look for in a spouse? Any ideas? 8 lines. So the Shulchan Aruch is obviously very concise, right? He lists several qualities you should look for in a spouse. Take a guess. What's the most important quality in a spouse? Respect. That's a good one. You hear that often. Doctor, any ideas?
Kind.
Kindness. You cheated.
Uh-oh.
So, actually, no. The Shulchan Aruch is very basic. He says, you want to know what to look for in a spouse? Wish I had my reading glasses, but. Yisa Adam Isha Sheyesh Bo Shum Psul. You have to marry someone who's Jewish. This is what the Shulchan Aruch says. Number one quality you should look for in a mate, in a spouse, is that they should be Jewish. I don't know. Okay. I thought he was going to give me a little bit more gravy, maybe respect, maybe kindness, maybe something, you know. But listen to what he then goes on to say. In this small print here, which I can't even pretend to read anymore, he says, if it's so important to marry a Jew, then perhaps there should be an obligation, an affirmative obligation to do a background check. You should have to look into their history and see, was the mother Jewish, was the grandmother Jewish, was there a ger that wasn't kosher, was there a mamzer, who knows? Maybe you have to do a check to find out, even though the person claims to be Jewish, maybe they're not Jewish. The Shulchan Aruch says no. This is line number 2. Mishpachos becheskes kashrus. Anyone who claims to be Jewish, they start with chazaka, that they're kosher, and you're allowed to marry them, mehem lechatchila. You're allowed to marry them without any kind of background check. Someone claims to be Jewish, and they act Jewish, you're allowed to believe that they're Jewish. You're not obligated to do a background check. Third line. Listen to what he says here. But if someone's an azpanim, they have an unpleasant face. Choshinan lehem. You should suspect that maybe they're not Jewish. Can you imagine? This is what the Shulchan Aruch says. This is not some radical right-wing book. This is actual Torah law. If someone has an unpleasant face, you should be suspicious. V'roi l'israchek mehem, and it's worthy to keep away from them, to distance yourself from them. She'ilu simani psulus. It's a sign that someone may not be Jewish. Listen to the 6th and 7th line. And if someone is a sona es habrios, they hate living creatures. I guess the equivalent would be, you see someone who kicks dogs. He likes to torture animals. Chashinim bo beyoser, you have to really suspect them. V'achzorios, and they're not pleasant people. Ve'eno gomo lehem chesed, and they don't do kindness. Choshinim lo beyoser, shema givonahu. They're probably not Jewish. Talk about racial profiling. And this little tiny itsy-bitsy print down here, on these words, Roy L'Slachik Behem, he says, Sheyesh Los Gimel Simanim. There are 3 signs of being a Jew. He doesn't mention bris milah. He doesn't mention being rich. I was at a group yesterday that was saying all Jews are rich, right? Listen to the 3 simanim. Avo yesh simanim. She'eluhem. Yeshenim. They're pleasant people. Yeshenim. Rachmanim. They're merciful. V'gomlane chasadim. And do kindness. This is not some Musar sefer trying to teach us Jewish philosophy. This is a text of halacha, of Jewish law. The 3 signs of being a Jew are being pleasant, being kind, that's what makes a Jew. Earthquake 2 weeks ago in Nepal, or 1 week ago, the first field hospital on site set up by who?
Israel.
Happens every place there is a tragedy. It doesn't matter if it's Haiti. It doesn't matter how many millions of dollars are flowing from America. It doesn't matter where the money's necessarily coming. The first field hospital is always by Jews, unless it happens to be an earthquake in Iran and they say they don't want us to help. They'd rather their people die than have an Israel field hospital. This is the hallmark of a Jew. The Arab says we're racist for not raping their women. No. The reason IDF soldiers don't rape women is not because they're racist. It's because they tick a little bit differently than everybody else. It's responsibility. You want to know what your responsibility is? The Shulchan Aruch spells it out for you. To be pleasant, to be kind, and to be merciful. That's what your obligations are as a Jew. Yes, we have 613 mitzvahs. Most of them we can't do today. We have mitzvahs to do. The mitzvahs are obligations that we have to do, but you have core obligations of who you are as a Jew. The Shulchan Aruch is talking about who you are, what defines you as a Jew. You could put on tefillin and do nothing to be a Jew. I suggest to you there probably are many people like that, people that do things out of rote. You have to do those things, of course, but you have to be the inner core person who's a Jew also. So that's our responsibility. Understand that we have a responsibility of being that kind of people in this world. That's what goes along with being Am HaNivchar and Am Segula. Let me share with you one other idea on this point. Many people wake up, I'll take a poll of the audience. 11 terrorists decided to fly 3 airplanes into targets on 9/11. Everybody remembers that. You're all old enough for that, right? A lot of people died. If those terrorists had not flown those airplanes that day into the World Trade Center and into the Pentagon, would those people have died that day anyway?
Which people?
The people that died in the World Trade Center.
Okay.
Would they have died that day anyway from something else? Does every bullet have its name on it?
Some probably would have.
Does every person have its time? So statistically, 85% of women that I pose this question to say, yes, they would have all died that day somehow. It's about 50-50 among the men. I don't know who's right, I don't know who's wrong, but I will tell you what the Rambam says. The Rambam says you have to be nuts to think that those people would have died anyway. Like the doctor said, some would have, some wouldn't have, I don't know. And he brings proofs. The Rambam doesn't ever speculate on anything. The Rambam was the ultimate thinking person. He says, let's just look at this. The Torah says in Bereshis, he brings 12 proofs. I'll just share a couple of them with you. It says that after Cain kills Hevel, right after the world was created, Hashem comes to Cain and says, all kol demei achicha, all the bloods of your brother are crying out to me from the grave because of what you did. Rashi points out that it uses the lashon of demei, the plural, not dam, but demei. Is what's plural? Rashi says, all the descendants that would have come out of Hevel, that were never born because Cain killed him. They were all complaining to God about the injustice. Because Cain committed murder, we were never born. Where's the fairness in that? So the Rambam says, who's talking? If those people were not intended to ever be born, there's no one to be talking about. So that's proof number one the Rambam brings. And as everything with the Rambam, the Rambam is very hard to argue with. His proofs are completely logical. To the point where he goes to all the way down to Moshe Rabbeinu, when he kills the Mitzri. Remember the story when the Mitzri is hitting the Jewish man, and Moshe sees it and he kills the Mitzri. What does it say first in the pasuk? He looked to his left and his right to see. What does Rashi say? He looked into the future generations of this person and saw that nothing good was ever going to come out of him. So he felt then he had the right to take his life. So the Rambam says, wait a second. Nevuah is seeing something ahead of time before it happens. Moshe didn't have a nevuah here about the future generations of this Mitzri because he killed him. The future generations of this Mitzri don't exist. What he saw was an alternate reality of what would happen if he didn't kill the Mitzri. So the Rambam uses that as his final proof that it is very clear that things will or won't happen based on the decisions that we make. We have the ability to change the course of history by who we kill, by who we invite to our table, by who we befriend, by how we act. Every day, All the decisions we make every day has the ability to change a person. You don't even realize how. I'll tell you one story about this. One of my great teachers who died last year was named Rav Usher Rubenstein, a great, great man. He died at the age of 80 after living in Israel for the last 50 years. He grew up in the 1950s in Five Towns near Far Rockaway. Was a very, very modern American kid being raised by some Holocaust survivors. Went to Hafter, who, if any of you know, is a very, very modern Orthodox school, and he's wearing jeans and whatever all through his teenage years. And at 18, his father, an old man Holocaust survivor, says to him, I don't know what to do with you anymore. I'm going to send you on a bus to Tell's Yeshiva in Cleveland. You're 18 years old, you finished high school, you don't like it at Tell's, I've tried, I don't know what else to do. So Rav Usher Rubenstein hops on the bus to Tell's, says, take a look. He's wearing his nice colorful clothing. He gets to the Tell's Yeshiva in Cleveland, walks into the building, goes down the hallway, looks into the Beis HaMedrash, and he sees everybody's wearing black pants and a white shirt. This is never going to work. Turns around, walking back down the hallway, getting ready to go back to New York. I did what my father asked. I came, I looked. On his way down the hallway, he bumps into somebody who says, oh, Shalom Aleichem. Are you a new boy here? Nope, I'm just passing through. Well, we're about to have lunch. Why don't you join us? So I sat down and I stayed for 16 years. Rav Usher Rubenstein went on to have tens of thousands of Talmidim. I was lucky enough to be one of them for a couple years. A man who radically changed my life because of the pure person that he was. All because one person who probably doesn't even know who he is stopped to say Shalom Aleichem. It's not an exaggeration to say that one good deed can literally change the world. That's the challenge that's on all of us for being Am HaNivchar, for being Am Segula. It doesn't mean that we're better than everybody else and therefore we get to walk around with our heads high. It means we have an awesome responsibility. And the Rambam tells us the ramifications of those responsibilities are that we can literally change the world. I don't know, that makes it hard for me to go to sleep at night. That's what I brought to share with you. So now I would like to ask any questions, and I would like to hear the doctor's pushback. Nothing? Wasn't that interesting?
No, it was.
No. I would like to interact with you about these points.
I take great pride in the fact that 20% of the Nobel laureates are Jewish. I do not take that to mean that there's anything unusual or special about Jews genetically. There's something different and special about the fact that, for historical reasons, Jews have treasured learning and education. And that's the difference. It's not
a bad argument.
It's a cultural.
It's a
Excuse
cultural.
me, I don't know for sure that it's only cultural, but I have no proof that it's anything other than cultural.
And again, most of the response that I get of that nature are exactly from people like yourselves who are scientists and committed to the scientific method. And if there's no proof, then I can't prove it. But I will tell you that the Nobel Prizes are not related only to fields of education. They're in fields of art. They're in fields of things that, and again, we live in a culture today, you and I, you're probably a little younger than I am.
I doubt that.
Okay,
You're probably younger than I am.
You're just aging better than I am then.
Let's put it this way. I remember when the Beatles were on Ed Sullivan.
I was alive, but I don't remember it. But I will tell you this. I went to see an exhibit probably 25 years ago with my wife. We were just married. And the Smithsonian Institute in Washington was doing an exhibit on Jewish emigration. By and large, was very flattering. It was very flattering about all that Jews had accomplished in the time that they had been here. But there was one exhibit where they showed a credit report from the W.R. Dunn Company. It was the precursor to Dun & Bradstreet, who became one of the greatest credit scoring agencies in the country. But the W.R. Dunn Company, and this is what their credit report said in something like 1905 or maybe 1885. I don't remember the exact year. This guy named Strauss or somebody like that, who was one of the precursors to Levi Strauss and Company, wanted to take out a loan. That may help us with some time context. And the credit report on Mr. Strauss was usually pays his bills on time and has a general reputation for honesty in the community. But his ancestors did loot the crown jewels of Egypt and never returned them. I'm not making this up. That's what it actually said in the W.R. Dunn report, the credit report on this Strauss gentleman in the early 20th century or late 19th century.
18-something or other.
Perhaps.
I'm pretty sure.
You may be right. Like I said, it's 25 years ago. In any event, though, you certainly remember what it was like in Hollywood in the 1940s and 1950s when every Jewish person there had to change their name. Because if you were a Jew named Steven Spielberg, you weren't getting any work in the 1950s. You had to change your name. It wasn't until the left came along and made it bad to stigmatize Jews that Jews took over Hollywood. So I suspect that if you look historically at the years, you will find that the Jews winning Nobel Peace Prizes was at a time when there was still rabid anti-Semitism overtly in the secular world. Long before Jews had taken over the premier educational institutions in this country or in any other, when Jews came to America, there's a reason they went to Hollywood, and there's a reason why they started the Strauss Company. Because they didn't have any education. They weren't able to get an education, most of them, until the 50s. Some were lucky enough in the late 40s. But these statistics go back to 1918, when there wasn't a Jew on the planet who had an education. It's true now. What the doctor says is 100% true. Jews as a culture, particularly the Ashkenazic Jews, have made education a premier life goal. And that can explain some of it. But it doesn't explain the absolutely astronomical disproportionate amount of statistics, and it doesn't explain about the time period before 1950 when a Jew couldn't get an education, and the time before 1960 when most of them couldn't afford it. But as you said, I posit to you that you're probably right. I'm not prepared to say, because I don't know, that it's something on the genetic level. It may be something on the soul level. We're not just a product of our genetics. There's something called a Jewish neshama, something that makes us rachamim, something that makes us yeshenim, something that makes us crave chasadim. It's probably not in our DNA. I don't know. I don't know how the two mesh together exactly. But when God blows the neshama into a Jewish soul, he's blowing something different. I don't know whether it's genetics, but there's too many things to suggest it. How does a completely secular Jew who's never kept Shabbos in his life, may not even have bris milah, he's raised in Tel Aviv, he knows nothing about Judaism except for the fact that there's some crazy people who light candles on Shabbat? How does that person know that you don't rape women when you conquer a city? Is it by some internal moral code that he's born with, raised with? Or has it in his neshama? I don't know. But there's something very, very different about us. And it makes all of you my friends. I'd faster let you babysit my children than someone who comes with a recommendation from Angie's List. Because we share a common morality that's in our souls. That's not to say that Jews don't do some bad things. We all know they do. Because that's our Achilles heel. When we stumble just as big as we succeed. And that's the challenge we have every day. The Rambam says what we do changes the world? Yeah. Yeah. But if we change the world negatively, we really, really mess it up. Really mess it up. Every day, every minute, whoever we greet, an opportunity to change the world. I don't know whether it's genetics or whether it's something on the spiritual level. But my young 50 years has taught me that there's something very, very different about us. Do I take pride in it? I admit I do. But not to the point where I say it lets me sit at home and say I'm better than everybody else. It means I have to accomplish more today than everybody else. That's our challenge. That was the challenge that was given to us when we got the Torah. That was the challenge that was given to us for this holiday. Am Segula and Am Hanivchar. It's just as true today as it ever was. That's what I share with you tonight.
Levi Strauss, 1829 to 1902.
That's the 19th century.
Thank you.
My pleasure.